Hello, everyone. Welcome to the latest edition of the Weekly Brief. This is our periodic look at the latest news from the legislature for superintendents and school board members all across the state. I am Robbie Feinberg. I am the Director of Communications and Government Relations at the Maine School Management Association. And it has been a very busy week. So we are hoping to get you caught up on what has gone on, what we are expecting in the weeks ahead. So to do that, I'm actually going to try out a different format this time. I'm going to share my screen, and this will hopefully allow you to kind of follow along a little bit better. So we're going to do a screen share, a little presentation for you. So let me set this up. And there we go. This is our little presentation here. So to start, I want to just walk you through what you need to know for this week. This is the week of March 3rd, Monday, March 3rd today. So a few things to note. We had a very busy week last week. Bills on school funding, minimum teacher salaries, school start times, and graduation requirements. We're going to go into details on all of those and the ways that school leaders were really advocating on many of these different bills. We'll go into that in a little bit. But what's important to know is that we are going to be having work sessions on these bills. These are coming up this week as well. And so we could see votes coming out of committee already on some of these different bills. That will be very exciting to watch, be very interesting to see what we're going to be learning about these bills. And of course, we are advocating, we will be at these work sessions advocating on behalf of your schools. So we'll go into some of these bills and then some action that you can take if your legislator is on the ed committee. Voice your concerns or thoughts about these particular bills as well. If you are in support of some of the school funding measures that we did hear about, reach out to them, let them know. If you are, in support of other bills, let them know. Feel free to reach out to them around it. And then other actions you can take, just monitor that we are going to have some important bills with public hearings in the weeks ahead. So we want you to be as involved as possible. We'll get into those in a little bit, but just to note, we're going to be having bills on school choice that will be coming about next week. These were expected. But if you want to testify about, school choice, how that might affect your own school district, some of these different bills, we highly, suggest you do get involved in that. And then also we have the bill LD 165. This is looking at student behavior and particularly would work to loosen some of the rules around school suspensions around student behavior. We know this has been a challenge for districts really across the state, for educators, for teachers, everyone. And so if you have stories from your own school about what student behavior, how that is affecting, the entire school environment, that's a good way to get involved. Share your stories, share your testimony. This is important. We'll get more into that in a little bit. But first, let's keep going. So in terms of last week, what to take away, we're going to start with, we actually got a little bit of an update from MEPRI on their report that they're doing around the EPS school funding formula. Their full report isn't out yet, but they did present to the legislative committee, to the education committee, on a few takeaways that they had, a few graphs, just a few things to learn about the school funding formula. So a few things that we wanted to highlight for you that they did share last week. First of all, they highlighted that student enrollment has fallen about 20% since 2001, and the cost of education has increased even above inflation. I don't think this surprises anyone who is in education. We have all seen this happen. But because of the enrollment decline, we have seen per pupil education costs, they have increased even more. So they had some great graphs, and you can actually see at the bottom here, we've got a link. You can check out some of these graphs, just looking at some of these general education trends. In terms of what's driving these trends, this was particularly interesting. So they compared several different sections, and they found that special education appears to be one of the largest cost drivers. We're sure that you are all seeing this as well. Special education just increasing so much further above what we would expect with inflation. We know that there are more students needing these specialized services, and that these costs have only gone up in recent years. But it was really a big deal to see just how much that had contributed contributed to it. The other piece as well that they highlighted was student and staff support was also driving a lot of the increase in education costs. And this is kind of a miscellaneous looking at things like, guidance counselors, nurses, teacher training, this kind of hodgepodge of many different supports for students and for staff. And I'm sure many of you in your districts, you see this. You see the need for more social workers, the need for more nurses, guidance counselors, these sorts of support services. But these often, aren't accounted for much in the EPS funding formula or aren't to an adequate degree, we feel like. And so the spending on these has gone up so much because our districts really do believe that it's needed. And then one of the biggest takeaways as well was that school budgets are increasingly raising more money than what they are allotted through the EPS school funding formula, what they're getting from the state. So one really interesting note was that in the last fiscal year, in fiscal year 2024, local school budgets included at least $600 million above the EPS formula's number. So that means $600 million more than what the EPS state formula said was an adequate education for our state. That is 26% over that EPS number, and all of that is paid for by local taxpayers. So that's a really big deal. It is showing that, our state formula, it is just an adequate education, but I think a lot of folks would argue that that $600 million more, it means that state funding formula is not really accounting for the current needs of today or for adequately accounting for that. So again, we will have much more to share on the MEPRI report when that does come out, likely in just a few weeks. And you see there, that's the site where you can get the latest on that EPS study. It's mepri.maine.edu/EPS study. Then we had several bills in the Education Committee that we did want to highlight for you, major public hearings. So one of them was around LD 34, that's the minimum teacher salary bill. We had a big public hearing on this. We had a lot of educators there voicing their support for this. They really felt like this salary proposal, which what it would do would incrementally over time would increase the minimum teacher salary to actually $52,500 by the 2030. And that we had a lot of educators saying we really need to go in that direction. You heard that from a lot of different teachers for retaining. Our associations actually split on this, interestingly enough. So superintendents were largely in support of this measure. It includes substantial state funding to help with this. And our superintendents felt like that was enough where they really did support this. They needed, they really feel like this is needed in order to get the educators that our school districts do really need. So we actually had a couple different superintendents voicing their support for this bill. The School Boards Association, meanwhile, was against this, and a lot of this was just about the impact on taxpayers. The Department of Education had a really interesting actual breakdown of this, looking at how this increase to the minimum teacher salary would affect the entire salary schedule for our state. And it showed that this would cost tens of millions of dollars to both the state and to local taxpayers as well if we do go in this direction, because obviously through negotiations, we're going to see if the minimum teacher salary goes up. We know from experience, it's going to increase salaries of other educators as well. So our School Boards Association really just said, we cannot take more of this on our local taxpayers right now. We cannot handle more of those costs at the moment. And the Maine Municipal Association also testified in opposition for that very reason as well. There is scheduled to be a work session on this bill this week, so we will be sure to loop you in about what will be going on there and keep you informed. In terms of other bills, one of them is LD 181 that we are watching closely. This is a bill that was from the last legislative session. That is basically the language is just continuing to this session. And it would change the formula pupil count that's used in the EPS funding formula. This would currently it works as it takes the average of the last two October 1 counts to assess how many pupils you receive funding for in the formula. This would change it in a couple of ways. It would actually change it to the average of the last 3 years, the last 3 October 1 counts, or it would be either that or the greater of that or the just the latest October 1 count. And the idea would be by stretching it out over 3 years, that would help out the districts who maybe are seeing declining enrollment or a big enrollment decline in 1 year. This would help to kind of alleviate that. It would help to kind of, I guess, lessen those peaks, lessen the impact of just a big 1 year decline. But it would also say it would be the greater of that number or their most recent October 1 count. And so this would also help districts that are seeing a big enrollment increase. They get a funding to go along with that increased enrollment. So we feel like this would actually help out both districts that are seeing declining enrollment and those that are seeing an increase. So we are very strongly pushing for this to pass. This got unanimous support during the last legislative session from the Education Committee. It nearly did pass. It got to the governor's desk, but got really just caught up in the last few days of the session. We're hoping that this is able to make it through pretty easily during this session. A couple other bills to watch as well. We had two bills around homeless and economically disadvantaged students. One would create a new weighted count for homeless students to get more funding for them in the formula. Another would increase the weighted count for economically disadvantaged students from 0.15 to 0.25, which would get more money to them as well in the funding formula. We had several superintendents coming out in support of these bills. They feel like this is really necessary to address the growing needs of our state, to really get the funding that is needed to supply the academic supports to these students, to get the social supports to these students, to just get smaller class sizes so that they can work more with a lot of these different students. Research really shows that these students need more in order to do well, and that the achievement gaps are large for a lot of the students who are both homeless and economically disadvantaged. So we feel like this would really help to get funding where it is really needed. So we will be strongly pushing in support of both of these bills. We'll likely be hearing more in work session that's coming up this week as well on where this goes, but we're really glad that we did have a substantial number of superintendents who supported this. We know that the committee really heard their perspective on this, and we're hoping that this can go forward. A few others we did want to highlight. LD 370, this would raise the minimum state standard for math education to get a diploma. It would just change it from 2 years of math to 3 years to get a diploma. Our association actually, we did a survey. We got a results of about 50 districts who actually said the vast majority of districts are already doing this. They already require 3 years of mathematics education to get a diploma. So we'll be watching this closely because it would be a change, but we don't expect it would really be that big of a change. One thing that our association is telling legislators, though, is that if they do make the change, it will cost money for some districts to have to go from that 2 to 3 years, and they may need to hire a new teacher or something like that. So we want to see that accounted for, and lawmakers have said that they understand this will cost some money, and we'll be looking to address that. And then lastly, LD 396. This is a constant bill we've seen in several different previous sessions, but this would mandate that high schools could start no earlier than 8:30 across the state. We are very, very opposed to. We are opposed to this. We believe in, there is good research showing that going in this direction could certainly help students. A later starting time can help with circadian rhythms, but every community is different, and changing a school start time affects so many parts of a school and a community. It affects transportation, it affects extracurriculars, school sports, after school jobs, even gym time, things like that. It affects so many parts of the school day, and our members believe that that should be left up to a local decision. That's really important, that is left up to a local decision. So we are opposed to this bill. We will be watching it closely as it continues, and we really hope that legislators see that this would be a real overreach, and it should be left up to local school boards. Now, in terms of what we are watching, I already mentioned we are going to have a lot of work sessions this week. On Wednesday, work sessions around the school funding bills. On Thursday, work sessions around the school start time bill, graduation requirements, a bill that would mandate cursive instruction, the bill that would change the learning results timeline. So we could see a lot of committee reports coming out. They could be voting out a lot of these different bills. We'll be sure to give you information about this as this goes. Then we also wanted to highlight that there is a bill that is being heard actually Monday, March 3rd, that would prohibit doxing. This is sharing personal information in a way that could potentially damage a person in certain ways. And so this would prohibit doxing specifically of a minor. We've unfortunately seen more and more of these instances. And so our associations are weighing in and saying that they do feel that is important that the legislature work on ways to help to stop this from happening and to deter these sorts of instances. So we'll let you know kind of what happens with this bill as this continues. Then just a few other dates to monitor as well. So there are going to be several bills on teacher mentoring coming up the week of March 10th. Some would loosen some certification rules, boost teacher mentoring programs. One would provide funding to the main teacher residency project, which pays for internships and mentorships in schools really all across our state right now. And that is really intended to help to boost the supply of teachers and to help retain teachers as well. So we'll be watching that closely. As I mentioned earlier, there are going to be many school choice bills being heard on Wednesday, March 12th, raising the charter school cap, creating school vouchers, a bill around basically expanding school choice for those in very small schools as well. And then on Thursday, March 13th, there's going to be a hearing around LD 165. And like I mentioned, this would loosen some of the rules around student behavior and so school suspensions. These are all going to be pretty significant. And so we'll be actually putting out a newsletter with information about many of these. And if these would affect you, we will ask you to supply your own testimony, particularly that student behavior bill. That's going to be very important. We know this is affecting so many of your districts. So we will ask you, please weigh in on LD 165. Share the stories of what you and your districts are experiencing with our legislators. They want to hear from you. We'll be asking for more information to come over the next few weeks, but just keep these on your mind as it's going. So that's most of what we have got to share this week. Obviously, as you can see, it is getting to be very busy in the legislature, and so we will share plenty more for you in the weeks and obviously the months ahead. We're expecting the flurry of bills to only continue, so we will be sure to report back to you on new bills that we see, the ways that the legislature is weighing in on it, and actions that you can take. As always, thank you so much for your service to our state, for your service to students, and we look forward to talking with you soon. Thanks so much.